For every case solved, there are countless others that fall silent. Trails that go cold, evidence that vanishes, and answers that never come. These aren't just unsolved crimes. They're stories frozen in time, and families still waiting for closure. Today, we examine 5 forgotten cold cases that continue to haunt those left behind. These are the disappearances, murders, and mysteries that, despite years, even decades, remain unsolved. This is Forgotten Cold Cases that still haunt families. Coconut Grove, Florida, March 5, 1974. A quiet, artsy community suddenly shaken by a mystery that would span decades. That afternoon, 17-year-old Amy Billig left her family home around noon. She told her mother she was going to meet her father at his art gallery just a short distance away. She never arrived. Witnesses later reported seeing a girl matching Amy's description hitchhiking along Main Highway. At the time, hitchhiking was common among teens. But in Amy's case, it may have been a fatal decision. The initial police investigation turned up no solid leads. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Her parents were devastated. But it was her mother, Susan Billig, who became the driving force behind the search for Amy, turning into a tireless investigator, advocate, and at times, a target. Susan began receiving chilling phone calls, anonymous voices claiming that Amy had been abducted by a violent motorcycle gang and forced into trafficking. One caller, who became known only as Hank, tormented Susan for over 2 decades, calling from across the country with detailed descriptions of Amy's alleged abuse, captivity, and eventual death. Susan followed every lead she received. From Florida to the Midwest, and even California, she spoke with bikers, visited prisons, and worked with law enforcement. Some gang members admitted to knowing Amy. One said she had died in captivity. Another claimed she had escaped only to vanish again. But none of these claims were ever verified. Over the years, Susan received hundreds of hoaxes, false leads, and cruel pranks. Yet she refused to give up, keeping Amy's story in the media and on missing persons lists long after the trail went cold. In 2005, Susan passed away, still not knowing what happened to her daughter. She left behind a legacy of resilience and determination, and a haunting case that remains unsolved to this day. The FBI and Miami-Dade police still consider Amy's disappearance an open investigation. She would be in her 60s today. Some believe Amy died shortly after she vanished. Others think she may still be out there, alive under a different name, never knowing how far her mother went to bring her home. In the remote wilderness of Northern California lies the former resort community of Keddie, a peaceful place that became the setting for one of America's most haunting, unsolved crimes. On the morning of April 12, 1981, inside Cabin 28, 3 bodies were discovered brutally murdered. The victims were Glenna Sue Sharp, a 36-year-old single mother, her teenage son, John Sharp, 15, and John's friend, Dana Wingate, 17. They had been tied up, beaten, stabbed, and bludgeoned with a hammer. Investigators described the scene as savagely violent, suggesting a personal or rage-fueled motive. Blood was found throughout the cabin, including on the walls and ceiling, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Missing from the scene was Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina Sharp. Her disappearance added a terrifying new layer to the crime. A massive search was launched, but she wouldn't be found for over 3 years. In 1984, a bottle collector discovered human remains in Feather Falls, more than 50 miles away from Keddie. Dental records later confirmed the remains belonged to Tina. What makes this case even more disturbing is that 3 younger children, including Sue's sons Rick and Greg, along with their friend Justin Smart, had been sleeping in a bedroom just feet away from the massacre. They were left unharmed, and at least one of them later recalled hearing or witnessing parts of the crime. Suspicion quickly turned toward Martin Smart, the stepfather of young Justin, and his house guest, John Bo Bobed, a man with alleged connections to organized crime. Both men were reportedly at a bar with Sue the night before, and Martin's wife Marilyn later claimed he had confessed to her that he killed Sue because she had tried to break up their marriage. Martin allegedly wrote a letter confessing his guilt, discovered years later in the case files. In it he wrote, "I've paid the price for your love, and now I've bought it with 4 lives." Despite all this, neither man was ever charged. Boubed died in 1988 and Martin in 2000. A series of investigative missteps, including lost evidence, a poorly handled crime scene, and unrecorded interviews, may have derailed the case early on. In recent years, Plumas County Sheriff's investigators reopened the case, uncovering new DNA evidence and a hammer matching one missing from the crime scene. The findings pointed once again to Martin Smart and Bo Boubede, but both remain beyond the reach of justice. Today, more than 4 decades later, the Keddie Cabin Murders remain officially unsolved, haunting the survivors, investigators, and the tiny mountain town that never forgot. It was just after 11 a.m. on June 13, 2001, when Jason Jolkowski, a quiet, dependable 19-year-old from Omaha, Nebraska, vanished during a routine walk. Jason had been called into work at Fazoli's, a local Italian restaurant. Because his car was in the shop, he arranged to meet a co-worker at nearby Benson High School, just 7 blocks from his house. He told his mother he'd be there in about 15 minutes, but he never arrived. What makes Jason's disappearance so chilling is its ordinariness. He lived in a safe neighborhood, it was broad daylight, and the distance was short. No one saw him leave, no witnesses came forward, and no surveillance footage ever surfaced. Jason simply vanished, midway through a walk he'd likely done hundreds of times. Police searched the area thoroughly. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. His bank account, cell phone, and social media were all untouched. Jason had no known enemies, no history of running away, and no reason to disappear. By all accounts, he was a responsible young man who loved broadcasting, radio work, and spending time with his family. What happened in those 7 blocks between his home and the high school has remained an unsolved enigma for over 2 decades. Jason's case eventually led to something powerful. His parents, desperate for answers, founded Project Jason, a non-profit dedicated to assisting families of the missing and advocating for better laws and public awareness. Their work helped inspire legislation like Jason's Law, passed in Nebraska in 2005, which improved the handling and reporting of missing persons cases. But despite their efforts and national attention on the case, not a single solid lead has emerged. Today, Jason would be in his 40s. His face, once that of a bright, hopeful teenager, has been digitally aged by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, in the hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize him. But for his family, each year without answers only deepens the pain. Because Jason Jolkowski didn't vanish in the shadows. He disappeared in the middle of the day and left nothing behind. In the early hours of Valentine's Day, 2000, something unthinkable happened in the small town of Shelby, North Carolina. Asha Degree, just 9 years old, vanished from her family's home, without a trace. Her parents last saw her asleep in bed around 2:30 a.m. But sometime before dawn, Asha quietly packed her book bag, slipped out of the house, and disappeared into the night. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication of a struggle, just an open front door and an empty bed. What makes Asha's case so haunting is not only her young age, but the strangeness of her actions. It was raining heavily that night, and a storm had knocked out power across the area. Yet, around 4 a.m., several motorists reported seeing a small girl walking alone along Highway 18, dressed in a long-sleeved white shirt and pants. Some even tried to stop, but when one driver turned around to check on her, the girl ran into the woods and vanished. Asha Degree was never seen alive again. A week later, police found her hair bow and pencil in a shed nearby, suggesting she may have taken shelter. But the most chilling discovery came 18 months later, when her backpack was unearthed by a construction crew 26 miles away in Burke County. It had been double-wrapped in plastic, as if someone had tried to preserve it. Inside were some of Asha's personal items, but also a random pencil case and a children's book that had been checked out from her school library, sparking theories that she may have been lured away with promises or manipulation. The FBI believes Asha left the house on her own, but not without influence. She may have been groomed or coerced by someone she trusted, someone who knew how to manipulate a young child into leaving the safety of her home willingly. Over the years, hundreds of tips have come in. A $45,000 reward has been offered. In 2016, investigators received a credible lead involving a man who may have been connected to the case, but no arrests have been made. Despite the decades that have passed, Asha's family has never stopped searching. Her mother, Asha Degree, still organizes annual walks and awareness events, keeping Asha's memory alive in the hope that someone, somewhere, will come forward. Today, Asha would be in her 30s. But in the minds of those who remember her, she's still the shy, sweet girl with the warm smile, who left her home on a rainy Valentine's night and never came back. One of America's oldest and most puzzling missing person cases unfolded on October 24, 1961, in the quiet suburban town of Lincoln, Massachusetts. Joan Risch, a 31-year-old wife and mother of two, disappeared from her home under circumstances that still baffle investigators to this day. That morning, Joan's husband, Martin Risch, left for a business trip. Joan spent a typical day at home with her 2-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter, who she later walked to a neighbor's house around 11 a.m. so she could run errands. She was last confirmed seen at 2:15 p.m. when a neighbor saw her standing in her driveway. By 4:15 p.m., her daughter returned home to an empty house and a disturbing scene. The kitchen was in chaos. Blood was smeared across the walls and floor, estimated to be about half a pint, enough to raise concern but not necessarily fatal. A table was overturned. A phone receiver dangled off the hook. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious robbery, and Joan's purse and belongings were untouched. Her infant son was still safe in his crib upstairs, but Joan Risch was gone. Police followed the trail of blood, which led from the kitchen to the driveway and abruptly stopped. Some witnesses claimed to have seen a woman matching Joan's description walking along nearby roads that afternoon, disoriented and clutching her stomach. But no identity was ever confirmed. Then came one of the strangest details in the case. While searching the home, investigators discovered that Joan had recently checked out library books on topics including disappearances, missing persons, and even a case involving a woman who had staged her own vanishing. That revelation opened the door to a wave of speculation. Had Joan meticulously planned her disappearance? Or were the books just a disturbing coincidence? Her husband always maintained she had no reason to run. She had no history of mental illness, and no evidence ever emerged of a secret life. Over the years, countless theories have emerged. A botched abduction, a staged disappearance, even a psychological break caused by repressed trauma. But every lead has led to a dead end. More than 60 years later, Joan Risch's fate remains unknown. No body was ever found. No confirmed sightings. Just a trail of blood, and questions that still haunt the town of Lincoln. Every year, thousands of families lose someone they never find. Each cold case represents not just a mystery, but a person, a loved one, a story unfinished. These 5 cases may be forgotten by the headlines, but for their families, they're a daily ache. And unless someone speaks up, the silence wins. If you have any information on the cases discussed, contact information is in the description. You could be the reason someone gets closure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more investigations into the world's darkest mysteries. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop searching.